Welcome to Turning Point USA's proudly hosted 2021 event, the Gen Free Tour. Joining us on stage tonight, Charlie Kirk. We are proud to be here at the University of Oklahoma. Let's get this started. Now, welcoming to the stage, Charlie Kirk.
Wow. Thank you. Awesome to be here. Wow, it's awesome. Standing room only. It's great to be here in a state that is pretty much open, so I guess we can celebrate that, and that's terrific. Interesting lighting here. So it's great to be with you guys. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight, and I want to thank our amazing Turning Point USA chapter leaders and everyone that's worked so hard on this event. I want to thank our hosts, this Hilton Garden Inn. It's kind of hard to find a venue every once in a while nowadays, so I want to give it up for our wonderful hosts that allowed us to have this event, so thank you. It seems that having in-person events is very hard right now. There's a lot happening in our country, and I want to get through a lot of things tonight, some things that are happening that are impacting all of your lives, especially at your colleges, your high schools. Maybe if you're homeschooled, you might be able to avoid some of this stuff, but it's definitely in our media and almost everywhere in our pop culture. A couple days ago, there was an atrocity in Colorado, and our heart goes out to all those victims. And we were very slow to rush to judgment, as we should be in those instances. And not everyone was. So immediately, the gun grabbers, the people that want to take away our Second Amendment rights and our constitutional rights, they were quick to try and label this atrocity of what happened in Boulder, Colorado, as something that was just not untrue, but it was opposite of the truth. And so you guys know who Mina Harris is? Do you know who this is? It's the niece of Kamala Harris, not a very popular person. So she tweeted, this is very important, this is where critical race theory and all this nonsense leads you. The Atlanta shooting was not even a week ago. Violent white men are the greatest terrorist threat to our country. This is what she said. The niece of Kamala Harris, taking exactly after her aunt. Another person, Dr. Oni Blackstock. People will continue to die, verified on Twitter, just so that white men can own guns and reinforce the power they already have. Now, if you now know, 12 hours later, we know that was not the case. The person that did this awful shooting, not that it should matter that much either way, but all of a sudden, if they want to overly racialize everything, hold on, this person was an Islamic fundamentalist. This person hated Donald Trump. It's not a white person that walked into a grocery store and started shooting indiscriminately. And the activist media is not covering any of this. I want you to imagine this, though. I want you to imagine if anyone, Donald Trump Jr., tweeted this out. The Atlanta shooting was not even a week ago. A violent, fill in any other color except white men. Could you imagine? So why is this all of a sudden acceptable? Well, it's because in the last year, my goodness, has our country changed, right? I mean, this is our first campus event in over a year. I guess it's sort of a campus event. And my goodness, has so much changed. Not only have we gone through what I consider to be the worst mistake in American history, the unconstitutional, immoral lockdowns, and we should never lock down our country again, ever. Not only did we go through a series of lockdowns that crushed small businesses, I'm going to tell you why we did the lockdowns, because it's a very important point that I think everyone misses. And it's not because of science. They've never actually followed the science. They follow the scientists that they like that are wrong about everything, like Dr. Anthony Fauci, who should be fired immediately and held accountable for the damage that he's done to our country. Gone through the lockdowns, and then last May, there was the death of George Floyd, and I did a whole video on this. I encourage you to check it out. It's probably been one of the most misrepresented news items in the media in the last 9 months. And look, every death is a tragedy, but that's a very complicated death. It's not as simple as the media makes it believe. Very well, George Floyd might have been overdosing while that was happening. He said, "I can't breathe" 7 times before the police even laid hands on him. and Derek Chauvin was following the Minneapolis police code by putting his knee on the back of his neck, as it says in the guidebook to do it. Now, you could say that shouldn't be the code. It's a different argument, and I think there's probably an argument to be made that manslaughter, but first-degree murder based solely on racial discrimination, and then we're going to blow up our whole country and change the way we educate our children, that's not wise. And that's what we did the last 10 months, 12 months in our country, where because of that one incident, which all of you have seen, and has been on repeat, which again is more complicated than anyone in the activist media ever led you to believe, led us to allow a sinister and bigoted philosophy and ideology to now be the prevailing philosophy in almost every single one of your schools, called critical race theory. And I'm sure if you go to University of Oklahoma, any University of Oklahoma people here? It's awesome. Now, I can't see anything. And now, is any Oral Roberts people here? I have to say congratulations. That is just, it's just awesome. No, it really is. And it's a really great thing. And beating Ohio State, beating Florida, it's awesome. And all of Oklahoma should be very happy. So congratulations. And so I don't know if it's the case at Oral Roberts, but definitely at OU, I could tell you critical race theory is probably all throughout your curriculum, all throughout what your teachers. Am I right? I'm just guessing. Okay. So what is this? And how is it that Mina Harris, the niece of the Vice President of the United States, is able to wrongly label this as just saying this is an epidemic of white people killing as terrorists? And the main reason is that we have decided, and we being not exactly everyone in this room, but our leaders and weak conservatives are to blame for this, that all of a sudden we are going to make the color of people's skin the most important thing in our country. I don't want to live in that country. That is not a good thing. I grew up in America like 9 years ago, where I was told that if you care about people's skin color, you're a bigot. And that's exactly right. I care about your character. I care about your soul. I care about your actions. Your skin color is completely and totally irrelevant to me. In fact, if you care about people's skin color, maybe you're the racist. So, this is an ideology that is not just now in the fringe of some North African lesbian poetry class at the University of Oklahoma, right? This is everywhere. This is in our corporations, it's in our military, it's in our schools, obviously. And what is it exactly? Because I know there's a lot of parents in this room and watching online, and you're probably a little shell-shocked. You say, where is this coming from? Where we're teaching our children to care about their immutable characteristics, which we know where that leads. And it's not just civilizational ending stuff, it is humanity ending. And so where is this coming from? It comes from a very specific type of philosophy rooted in critical theory from a group of thinkers, Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault, Herbert Marcuse, who basically believed a couple things. There's no such thing as absolute truth. There's no proper reading of a text. You've probably heard this before. And that everything in life, whether you realize it or not, is a power struggle. They took the Marxist power dynamic and they applied it to American society, and they said the real power dynamic of what's happening in America, whether you realize it or not, is white people are oppressing people of color, specifically black people, all the time. So what do the critical race theorists actually believe? They believe that there's no such thing as individuals, that you are not actually an individual. You are a member solely of your group. Now, groups do exist. But groups are not nearly as important as first and foremost as recognizing that you, as an individual, have your own agency, your own action, your own capacity to speak, and you must be held accountable for your own actions, not the actions of a group. That's basically one of the most fundamental ideas of Western civilization. Where do we get this idea from? We get it from the Christian ethic. We take this for granted, but before the teachings of the Bible were mixed with the findings of the Enlightenment, everyone was almost always judged based on who their parents were, based on where they came from, based on what territories they controlled. And so blood used to matter a lot more. And so it's like your ancestry, who your parents were, was always very important. Western civilization changed that. And it didn't change it perfectly or immediately, but over time it's like, okay, you are going to have to make something out of your own life. And you're going to have to be held accountable for your own action and your own decisions. And so what we have seen over the last couple decades is this idea of critical race theory says, no, you're not actually an individual. You're not. That you are nothing more than a part of your group. So if you're a white person in this room, you are simply an oppressor, whether you realize it or not. Doesn't matter if you grew up as an orphan, you're still a white person, sit down and shut up, you're an oppressor. They take into zero account any sort of circumstantial evidence whatsoever, and this is widespread, as I mentioned, all throughout our society and culture. The second thing they believe is they do not believe in dialogue. Do you notice that free speech is something that is dying quickly in our country? Now, why is that? They believe that dialogue, which comes from the Greek word through logos, truth, or reason, or talking, through talking, we're able to find truth, right? So when we're able to talk about things, we're less likely to get to actually physical conflict. That's a good thing. Talking is a pressure release valve for any society, and it should be. That's why I'm a free speech absolutist. I believe even if you have awful ideas to say, that you should be able to say them, especially on digital social media. I'll get that in a second. And that some guy in his pajamas in Menlo Park, California, should not have the power to shut you up on Facebook and Google just because he disagrees with you. And I'm gonna make the constitutional conservative argument for why big tech must be reined in, and I could just imagine all of our YouTube numbers are gonna plummet because that's exactly what ends up happening, because they're in control of the dialogue in our country, and we never should have given it to them. And so the critical race theorists, and I call this the woke industrial complex. So they call themselves woke because they say, I've awoken with how much racism there is everywhere. No, you actually have awoken to how foolish you actually are. There's no wisdom in critical race theory, no appreciation for what came before you, no understanding of our history, no appreciation for what it means to live a good, complete, and full life. It's the exact opposite. And so the other thing that the critical race theorists teach, and you're probably seeing this in your education system in one way or the other, is that you should be given a bigger platform to speak based solely on what you look like. It doesn't matter if you have something true to say. They instead say, white people, sit down and shut up, allow somebody else to talk. Now, it doesn't matter if the other person is saying absolute gibberish or nonsense. Instead, it's worse than reverse racism. It is racism. Going after other people's skin color, saying that you should not talk based on something you could not control. Now, let me be very clear, and I always have to make this, claim, because the activist media needs, I don't know, you guys know, is that if you are a racist, you got a lot of work to do. You should repent, apologize, and I hope you find Jesus Christ in your life. I really do. Now, if you're a white person and you're not a racist, you have nothing to apologize for. That's a very simple thing to say. And the media, they lose their mind when I say something like that. But just your existence and your actions, unless they are racially motivated, you are not inherently doing something racist just because you are a certain way. A belief in that is something that is so sinister and so dangerous. Okay, so finally, I wanna break this apart, which is, how far is this and how do we fight back against this? And so, if you've noticed in the last year, there's this whole idea of cancel culture, right? I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this in one way or the other. And basically, it's this nonstop competition of people saying, I'm a better person than you are, right? And it is so unbelievably dangerous for any sort of country or civilization to participate in something like this. And so this is how it works. It's basically, you were, 10 years ago, you tweeted something that might be a little bit, I don't know, not politically correct, and therefore you should lose your job and your entire career should be abolished. You've seen this happen. I mean, don't we all feel so much safer that Dr. Seuss and Aunt Jemima and Gone with the Wind are now no longer in our society, right? It's complete and total nonsense. Of course, we allow Cardi B to go do whatever that is, but Dr. Seuss is gone. Like, it's in the same week we have to hear that Dr. Seuss must be censored from everything, but it's good for 7-year-olds to go watch Cardi B do that disgusting routine on network television on the Grammys. And which of course is so incredibly inherently contradictory. And so this is all rooted in basically a power struggle. And they being the left, the totalitarian left, in what they are trying to seek to do, they are trying to abolish any sort of speech, discussion, nuance, or growth. There are things I'm sure every single person in this room did 10 years ago. You look back and say, yeah, I'm not the same person I was. That's a good thing. Becoming more mature, developing better character should be appreciated and applauded. You see, never do they say, okay, you might have tweeted something 10 years ago. Do you still believe that? Instead, they say, oh, you must always be that person who you were 10 years ago. I'm going to destroy your life. That is not a sign of a mature or wise society. And just a word of the wise to everyone out there, if you encounter cancel culture in your own life, and I can't stand that term, but you guys all know what it means, please do me a favor, rally around other people that might come under this. we have to start pushing back against this nonsense and this garbage. Stand by other people that are... It is so destructive to our country. It really is. And so I want to get into this other thing, and there's so much I want to cover, which is kind of this false choice that we as conservatives are sometimes given. So I want to be very clear. I can't stand socialism. We have a whole organization dedicated to debating against socialism and deconstructing socialism. But there's a third way our country can go. We can either go in a pro-American direction, which I pray will go, and I'll talk about what that looks like and what it means, which is stronger families, having more children, increasing church attendance, having small businesses flourish again, restricting immigration, all these things that are very, very important to our country. Or we can go a way that's totally socialistic. But there's a third way, and we as conservatives must be outspoken against the socialist threat and also the corporatist threat. And this is where this critical race theory, woke industrial complex, it all kind of comes together. I will make the argument that certain private corporations are more powerful than our government. And that's not a good thing. So we as conservatives for years have been trained never to challenge private companies. Amazon, so what? They're a private company. They have all this power. We'll eventually get a competitor. I no longer want to tolerate that discussion. I no longer believe that. Instead, I will make the argument that the corporate oligarchy that's running our country is actually doing more to restrict your God-given freedoms and rights than our government. That's not to say the government can't vote and isn't, but let me give you a good example. If Google decided to pull down this live stream right now, what would my recourse be? I could sue them, and it would get tossed out immediately. Now, if the federal government came in and pulled the cord on our live stream, I could sue them, and I would probably win because the government's not allowed to do that. You'd have representation. You would be able to bring them through court. You have the right to sue your own government. These private companies have more power than our own consent to the governed compact, and I use the word government, but really the deeper word is this partnership that we have, or we're supposed to have, with the Constitution. Now, what is the Constitution and why does it exist? So some people say the Constitution is there to limit government. That's half true. It's not the total truth. The Constitution, first and foremost, is there to protect naturally granted freedoms and liberties given to us by God. The Founding Fathers understood this. And we're actually in the midst of a theological debate in our country, whether people realize it or not. And it's very simple. It's admitting that there is a God and you are not him. It's really not that hard. And most people on the left refuse to acknowledge that, right? There is no God and I might be him. And so, the Constitution recognizes this, and the Founding Fathers were so brilliant. And anyone who's being taught anything but that in your schools, you are getting such a disservice. I'm happy to go through all of the biggest lies, 3/5 compromise, Founding Fathers owned slaves. Happy to go toe-to-toe with anyone on that stuff, because there's so much history there that you're not being taught that I don't want to spend too much time to, unless there's someone that is more interested in that in the question and answer time. The point is that the Founding Fathers, they believed that human beings in their state of nature had a moral obligation to be free. Freedom of consciousness, freedom to own property, freedom to defend themselves, freedom to pursue your own destiny and pursue your own happiness, freedom to worship your Creator. And so the biggest form of threat against that freedom that they could possibly think of was a very strong government. Despots, tyrants, rulers, people like Joseph Stalin, people like Pol Pot, people like Mao Zedong. And generally, the American Constitution has done a good job of preventing that from coming to our country so far. So far, it's done a pretty good job. Why? Because the American Constitution spreads power over space and time. Space. States created the federal government didn't create the states. For example, Oklahoma should not be told what to do by New York or California. You have your own sovereignty. You have your own elections. You have your own ability to determine what you want to do. That's something that makes the American system different over space and over time. Most countries, you could take over the entire government in one election cycle. In this country, it takes minimum 6 years to win state, local, and federal elections, because it takes 6 years to control the Senate, because it's only up 1/3 at a time, to get really radical things passed. So the Founding Fathers put systems in place to slow down the potential threat of tyranny. And God bless them for that. However, I'm making the argument, and conservatives, and I know that I see a lot of heads nodding, that right now the primary form of potential tyranny is, of course, potentially the federal government and the president, but I think even more so, it's those private companies in Menlo Park. And this is a hard thing for conservatives to talk about. I get it. We're trained to say private business, private business, private business. Let me ask you a question. If you ride the highway down to Dallas, about 3 hours from here, and you get pulled over, and you say, sir, you're wearing a Make America Great Again hat. You are not allowed to drive on this highway. You say, says who? Well, we're a private highway, and that's the way it's going to work. No one would stand for that, right? You'd say, no, this is the only way I can get to Dallas. Now, there are private highways all across the country. A better example would be from Gary, Indiana to Chicago. It's a privately owned highway, Chicago Skyway. By federal law, you are not allowed to discriminate based on who drives on that highway. The people closest to angels and the people that are the scum of the earth, they are allowed to drive on that highway. It's true. It's called access to free and open transportation. You cannot all of a sudden have a gate that says people that voted for Donald Trump are not allowed to ride on this highway. It's not allowed. It's against the law. The same should be said for social media, because now those are the highways of information in our country. And so when you have a company that has 92% of all search results, 92%, and they're supposed to all of a sudden be treated like your local coffee shop, that's just a dumb argument. I hate to say that. And that is a corporatist argument. That is an argument made for and by trillion-dollar companies that want to run your life. So why did the lockdowns happen? I mentioned this earlier. It's not because of the science. Originally, I get 2 weeks, I get a month, I get 6 weeks. We're still trying to figure it out. But once we realized that who was most at risk, once we realized that this virus, most people, especially in our age demographic, weren't just going to survive, is that you had a higher likelihood of dying in an automobile accident than from this virus. And by the way, it's a very legitimate virus for all people, but especially for people over a certain age with certain underlying health conditions, and those people should take the virus very seriously. However, the cost of locking down the country was far greater than what the alternative would have been, and Florida shows us that. That Florida has open schools, open businesses, the second oldest population in the country, and they're doing unbelievably well all across the board. Now, so why did the lockdowns continue? Well, think to yourself, who got richer during the lockdowns? Bingo. You ordered a lot of packages from Amazon, didn't you? No, you didn't. Good for you, because you're an American patriot, that's why. No, but think about it. How many of you know at least 2 small businesses that will never reopen because of the lockdowns? Almost every hand goes up. Amazon is booming. Jeff Bezos is worth $155 billion. The Louis Vuitton guy is worth $136 billion. It's not a good thing for the country when that happens, when 40% of small businesses disappear over the course of 1 year. And then what the federal government does to try to save it is they send everyone $1,400 to subsidize inactivity. Instead, what they should do is they say, you know what, Amazon? Instead of a stimulus bill, we are going to pass a monopolistic bill, and we're going to break you into 15 different companies and send them back to states like Oklahoma and Kansas and Missouri and get some competition going instead of Jeff Bezos ruling like King George used to rule us over. And I do not make that comparison lightly. When you're able to control e-commerce, search engine results, you're controlling hearts, minds, decisions, and businesses. And we as conservatives must be very clear what we stand for. I love markets because why? Because they serve human beings. We must have a pro-human agenda in everything we do. That includes, by the way, protecting those that can't protect themselves in the womb. This pro-human agenda is now what is going to be the future, I believe, of the conservative movement, which is we care about family formation, we care about making our young people live full, complete lives with developing character, hopefully in the pursuit of absolute truth. We are not going to bow down to some corporate oligarchy. We want small business and entrepreneurship to flourish in our country. We want people that are 18, 19, 20, 21 not to go $80,000, $90,000 into debt to go search after a job that they were promised that will disappear overnight, so that they have to go work in minimum wage work, and their only hope is debt forgiveness. And I want to say something about this because I think conservatives get the debt forgiveness argument wrong in one way. I do not support debt forgiveness, but I have sympathy for people that advocate for it, and here's why. Because most people that go far into debt, you were lied to. You were lied to by the cartel. You were lied to by politicians that said you must go to college to succeed, and then you're left with all this debt burden after 4 years, and you say, I am not getting a job or a career that can correlate with the amount of money I borrowed. I would be angry too. And so we as conservatives must understand that a large portion of the younger population, younger generation, they're gravitating to Bernie Sanders and all these other politicians because they're the only ones that will validate some legitimate concerns they have. Let me be clear, I can't stand the victim thing. I'm not saying that you should just go around and have the oppression Olympics and say, give me something free all the time. I think that's nonsense. At the same time, I will say that there has been a sequence of public policy decisions that have negatively impacted our generation. And there has to be some way to address that, hopefully from a pro-conservative, pro-American, pro-human agenda. And that's the question that is going to be in front of the conservative movement in the next couple of years. Because the conservative, and you're seeing this happen right now, and in Washington, D.C., we're seeing a uniparty run our country, right? It seems as if that there's one party rule that want us to be continually in these foreign wars overseas, that want us to continue to do these bad trade deals, which, by the way, have destroyed tens of thousands of manufacturing jobs in this state alone, where they ship jobs overseas to Wuhan, China, and they bring back piles of plastic, and they say, aren't you a lot richer? You say, no, my cousin is addicted to opioids, my best friend committed suicide, and the high school can't fund itself, the local manufacturing plant has been turned into a soccer field, how exactly am I richer? They say, oh, well, the guy down the street, he's able to have 3 Maseratis, and all of a sudden they're perplexed when that guy puts a MAGA hat on for someone that promises better days for tomorrow. Listen to the concerns of your voters. You might learn something. And so, to continue on that point, trade, wars, immigration. Those are the 3 things that former President Trump, a friend of mine, talked about, and he hit a chord. Because those are the 3 things that the Uniparty says we're not supposed to talk about. We're not supposed to talk about how we bring in so many people into our country every single year, both legal and illegal, which is why I called for an immigration moratorium 2 weeks before President Trump did last year, because I believe that every single one of you deserve an American job first before somebody that comes into our country and prices you out of the job market. You should be given preference. You borrowed the money. You studied through our system. Your parents paid the taxes. We have a compact. We have a promise. We have an obligation to our citizens and our graduates to employ you before somebody in another country. My compassion, my heart goes out for those people. That is not what a nation is. A nation takes care of their fellow countrymen first. Then we can worry about being extendedly compassionate beyond them. And the accusation, and then I do want to get some questions here. I have no idea what time. I can only see like 15 people out here, but so I'm got it. Thank you. I have a little bit more time. So the argument people make is say, Charlie, you're so heartless for saying that. It's like, no. My heart goes out to those of you that are $40,000 into debt, that studied computer engineering, and you're trying to find a high-tech job, and then all of a sudden an H-1B visa comes in and cuts you out from it because they're willing to work for less than what you say, well, I have to pay off my debt. You see, immigration is one of the most important issues that it seems Republicans and Democrats can get along with. And I'm not going to make a political statement on this, and we're a nonprofit, so I'm just going to talk facts on this. There's a reason why all of a sudden Republicans and Democrats want to push an amnesty bill right now. Why? Well, we know why Democrats want more immigrants into America. Why? Votes. It's that simple. Pure power. Now, there's 2 P words. Republicans want one. Democrats want power. They just want power. It's that simple. Now, why would Republicans want this? Because they betray the promise to their voters. Profits. I think the profit motive is a healthy thing for entrepreneurs. But I think when you put your profit motive above your patriotic duty to your country, I got a lot of problems with that. Especially the promises that were made to you. Now, I want you to think about this. Your parents paid property tax and income tax to your state, local, and federal government for years, paying into a system. And then all of a sudden, when you're 23 years old and maybe $30,000 into debt, you go and try to find a job, and all of a sudden, you get priced out from somebody halfway across the world, and God bless them. I wish the best for them. But that's a violation of the American promise, isn't it? Because the American promise is if you pay your taxes and do what's right, eventually the promise will be returned to your children. And that's who gets priced out of this. But that's where Republicans see an opportunity brought to you by the Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber of Commerce wants to keep wages low and more people coming into America. And as a byproduct of this, why are we spending all this money in Washington, D.C.? If you guys want to get really Machiavellian with me, I can build this out for you. If you don't know, Niccolò Machiavelli wrote The Prince. Highly recommend it. It's really brutal. It's awesome with politics. It describes a lot. A lot of the things that you guys say, I don't recommend employing it in your daily life, but it actually explains a lot. A lot of things you'll say actually come from that ends justify the means, would rather be hated rather than loved. And it was written in a time when a bunch of Italian families were fighting for power, and he was basically an observer and realized human behavior when it comes to the pursuit of power is willing to put aside their publicly declared ethics and the pursuit of power. And boy, was Machiavelli right. Why are we spending all this money? Why did we spend $1.9 trillion after we spent $1 trillion in December, after we spent $4 trillion in the federal budget, after we spent $2 trillion, now Joe Biden wants to spend another $3 trillion. Whoa! That happened quick. Why? Now, the short answer is, Charlie, they want to addict people to government programs. That's half the answer. The other side would say, or the people would say, Charlie, we want to invest in our energy and our info. That's all a bunch of nonsense. We know that's not true. You look at where this money's actually going, you are subsidizing inactivity. Anyone else having, I don't know if this is the case in Oklahoma or not, because you guys are good, hardworking people, but I could tell you in other states, it's impossible to find an Uber right now. Why? Why would anyone want to drive their car if you get $1,400 plus unemployment? So why would I want to do that? I could extrapolate that example to other parts of the American economy, small businesses, restaurants. A lot of people are having trouble finding workers right now because you subsidize inactivity. Here's why. When you inflate your currency, there are only a couple ways to manage that, because that's what we're doing. We are going full speed ahead into a long-term inflation cycle. It's just the way it is. And if you own land and you have revenue-producing assets that you can touch, you're going to be okay in inflation. You know who's going to get crushed by inflation? Working people. People that do not have a lot of hard assets, people that go paycheck to paycheck, you're going to get crushed. And their solution will be to create more money and to subsidize that. But there's a deeper reason why they want to inflate our currency. Because the other way you could raise rates, they don't want to do that. They are not going to raise interest rates. They're addicted to cheap money. You could bring more people into America. See, if you expand the supply of human beings that are trading anything, by definition, then that pre-existing thing the aforementioned thing, I should say, that you're trading is then spread amongst more people. So if you have 335 million people that are trading in dollars, and then you have 370 million people that are trading in dollars, well, therefore, the inflated currency gets a little less inflated. They're making an argument to bring 30 million people into America in the next 5 years. They're creating that set of circumstances. That's what they're doing. They are creating a crisis that only open borders can fix, and we know exactly where that heads. So let's talk about open borders, because I don't think that we talk about this correctly enough, and we come across as being portrayed as hateful and heartless and soulless. Let me be very clear. I want closed borders because I care about the well-being of the people on the southern border. There are children that are being rented, 15,000 children a month, according to Tom Homan, former director of Immigration, Customs and Enforcement. 15,000 children that are being rented like they're a Blockbuster videotape. You guys don't even know what that is. Like a VHS cassette. No, seriously. Like they're being rented like they're a car. The sickest thing you can imagine, to be unaccompanied minors to gain entry into our country. The women that are sex trafficked across our southern border. The drugs that flow into America. The guns, the firearms. And we're supposed to believe that a porous border is something that is in the best interest of those people. That is a lie. You all of a sudden want to crush the cartel? You want to crush the flow of drugs? Police our border like we go police the border of Afghanistan or Korea. If we took our border 1/100th as seriously as we take the North Korean border, almost all of those problems would disappear overnight. But the powers that be don't want that, because they want low wages, they want more votes, and they're quietly in agreement for that. But also I want to make this other point, which is BLM Incorporated, which is how I call the Black Lives Matter movement, because they're a corporation more than anything else. They say they care about the livelihood of black Americans in our country. Then why on earth would they want to bring in another 20 to 30 million people to undercut the wages of black Americans in the inner city of our country? Well, because they actually don't want flourishing wages, and they don't want those communities to get richer, because as soon as they get richer, they may no longer be liberals. Everything they want is in the pursuit of power. The establishment, on the other side, in the pursuit of Chamber of Commerce appeasement, sometimes power, sometimes profits. I am saying tonight, what I am seeing that's optimistic from my friends J.D. Vance and other people is that a new conservative movement, thanks to our former President Trump, is coming, and it's gaining traction like you wouldn't believe, which is that it's really exciting. And it's one that puts our nation first, that does not look at America as a temporary colony to just maximize corporate profits, but this is our home. This is where our families are. We care about this place. We care about the well-being of it. We want a place where families can flourish, where small businesses can thrive, and that a small subset of 50 companies does not dictate every decision that we make. And here's the last argument I'll make about that corporate dominance, which is, if you're not even bought on the economic arguments I just made, you understand that they hate your value system if you're a conservative, right? They were supposed to be on team right, and they're the ones that are bringing in Robin DiAngelo to go teach the employees of Coca-Cola that all white people are racist. So for the corporations out there, if I didn't convince you on all of that, you broke your compact with conservatives the moment you invited the woke industrial complex to go run your corporations. I want nothing to do with those corporations that go out of their way to go teach their employees to hate themselves and hate America. And so what's the response to that? And here's the exciting thing, is you go back to the Constitution, right? The Constitution is a pro-human document. The Constitution wants to preserve our humanity through and through. Your right to speech, your right to property, your right to associate with your loved ones and also be able to worship your Creator however you see fit. But also, the Constitution, so remarkable, is that it gives you the sovereignty. We have the power. And this is why these corporations, and this is why the wealthiest people in our country are now starting what I call a top-down revolution. Does it feel like all of a sudden the most powerful people in the country are pressing down on the people? It's the first revolution that I've seen in a long time where the ones in charge are declaring war on the people that have nothing. It's perplexing, isn't it? Usually the Russian Revolution, Chinese Revolution, Cuban Revolution, it's the people that are pushing back against it. Instead, it's the people that have $140 billion in the bank account saying, you know who the problem is? Christians in Oklahoma. That's who we're going to go crush. And I'm telling you right now that the sooner we truly get woke and we wake up on this stuff, they're nervous because they know that their plunder is coming to an end. They're nervous because they know that the issues I just articulated, which is putting our country first, caring about your fellow countrymen, actually talking about flourishing families, these are 80% winning issues. These are not just like 50-50 wedge issues. They want us distracted talking about our skin color while the actual issues that will win us elections are right in front of us. They want us distracted on being like, I'm so sorry that I may or may not be the worst person in the history of the planet. Let me take a knee and give you my entire bank account. Don't do that. Do not submit to these people. They want you distracted from their theft. Because the moment that we stop talking about these stupid, silly issues, which there is no logic, there is no historical backing for any of it, their time will be up. And so people say, Charlie, what does success look like for you? A couple things. Number one, I want our kids to love America again. I want our kids to get fired up about our country again. We have to teach our values, or else those values will not exist. We have to get into the curriculum, we have to train teachers, and we have to be unafraid to say that America is the greatest country ever to exist in the history of the world. We are the least racist country ever to exist in the history of the world. We're the most generous country, most benevolent country, most creative country for a reason. And that reason is different than anyone that might tell you. It's not because we stole the land and that we're colonialists and any of that stuff. The reason is from our founding. There was always a commitment to improving ourselves, improving our nation, protecting our home, and pursuing the good. That is a moral country. I will defend it against any other country in the history of the planet. Have we made mistakes? Of course we've made mistakes. We're human beings. Don't look at the raw material we're dealing with. I mean, human beings are unbelievably broken by nature. You don't believe me? Most countries are totally screwed up. If you think people are naturally good, you could only believe that because in America, people are basically good. That's the only way you could possibly believe that. And of course we've made mistakes, but America's not a mistake. America's a gift. We've been given this short gift, and currently we have a decision to make. And I'll get to questions. Okay, good, yeah, I'll get to questions. And this gift will be protected and preserved and advanced based on our action and our commitment. So I understand there's a lot of depression going around. I understand there's a lot, get over all that stuff right now. So I'm telling you right now, the reason the ruling class and the elites are preemptively declaring war on you in your classroom, on social media, amongst your friends, is they are nervous. They're nervous that all of a sudden the 75 million people become 95 million people. They're nervous that protecting one's country is actually very popular. And so this can be our greatest moment, and it should be. But their entire campaign is one of silencing and suppression and intimidation. And the moment that we don't put up with it anymore, which is why these events matter so much, that we don't put up with this nonsense anymore, victory is inevitable. I truly believe that. Okay, let's get some questions, guys. Thanks for letting me riff through all that. Thank you. Hey, I can see you guys now. Okay. Sorry about that. It was like, my goodness. Okay, questions right here?
Yes, right.
Okay, keep the questions short, guys, and just form a line. So,
Right here. Okay, okay.
okay, let's get started.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Hello. So my question is about, so I'm in a crisis communication class at my college, and we were asked to come up with solutions for like the population control and whether, we want to feed more people or whatever. Well, one of my peers said that the solution should be that the U.S. should pay about $3 million a year for contraceptives, for the world's contraceptives. My question is, how do we get the average student to realize that that money doesn't just come from the government? It's not magic. It's
So I'll do you one better. So
taxpayer.
the premise of your class is that we have too many people. Yeah, we don't have
One of the things.
Yeah, I reject the premise. We need more. We need more children, not less
Yes.
children. Our country's on the verge of a population collapse. And so here's one piece of advice I'll give you for everyone in the room. As soon as you're talking about how we're going to pay for something, we've already lost the debate. First, you should say, why should we pay for that nonsense at all? And by the way, we shouldn't fund contraceptive. We shouldn't fund any of that garbage. But back to what you're saying. So this is basically you're being taught earth worship, okay? And that's what's being taught in most schools, which is somehow we must put the earth above the well-being of human beings. Remember, we have a pro-human agenda, right? Now, we shouldn't abuse the earth. We shouldn't pollute the rivers or the lakes. But always we should have a belief in human supremacy. I know that's like a weird thing to say, but that's basically where this conversation goes right now. I believe human beings are image bearers. You're made in the image of God. Every life is a gift, should be preserved and protected. We have 1 million abortions a year every single year. And I believe if you can't get that issue right, then look at all the other issues you screw up beyond that. But also, this is something that happens in the academy far too often, which is we have too many people, we need to get rid of population. I'm going to make a prediction that's the opposite. In 30 years, we're going to see declining population like you've never seen before. We're already seeing it here in America. So in the last year, you have a lot of people at home, people spending time locked down. You'd say, oh, birth rate's going to go up. It's a dramatic decrease like we've never seen before. Why? Half economic, right? It's expensive to have kids. People say, I'll have one of each, like they're picking out a Toyota or something, right? The other is that if you don't believe that children are necessary to be fruitful and multiply, to replicate your values and replicate yourself, why have children? So if you don't teach people that having children is necessary, and those of us that believe in the Bible, we have an answer for that. It's like the second chapter of the Bible, be fruitful and multiply. Might be the third. Anyway, the point is that it's right there. Then why have children? If you actually believe that climate change is an existential threat, which is complete gibberish, nonsense, and balderdash, and all of you guys should be unafraid to push back against all that garbage, because it's designed for one thing, power and control. And let me just tell you something that is a general rule. If your biggest worry in life is existential, you live a great life. If your biggest worry is the sky falling and not sanitation nutrition, getting murdered on the way home, or being beaten, you live a very nice life. You do. This climate change nonsense can only happen in a rich, generally peaceful society. This doesn't, you think that the people in the slums of India who have to worry, the 300 million that don't have access every single day to functioning toilets, you think that they're worried about the sky falling? Or maybe that they want a coal-fired power plant to be able to have a hospital or a school. And so I guess the final point I'll make on this, which is so important, is reject the premise. The premise of that whole thing is that more people, population increasing, much reduced people. I don't agree with that at all whatsoever. I think that we have a commandment to be fruitful and multiply. I do not believe even close that human population is what is destroying the entire earth. And even beyond that, I think that if that's their biggest concern, it's nice to lightly remind them that you live a great life. Maybe you should worry about improving yourself, not destroying the world around you. Thank you. It's good.
Thank you.
Hey, Charlie.
Hi.
Hey, so
I like
I'm
your
an
glasses.
officer. I'm sorry?
I like your glasses.
Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate it. So I'm an officer in the Army. I'm stationed about 2 hours.
Thank you for your service.
Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it. So one thing the Army is really good at is preparing for the last war. We're not really good at preparing for the next war. We don't know what we're going to face. We pretty much, by the time a war finishes, if it finishes these days, we're good at that. So I have 2 years left. I've been in the Army for 10 years, but I'm going to be transitioning out soon, going to law school. I think there's a greater threat at home than there is abroad. So my question to you, to kind of take that from the military to the conservative movement, and you talked about corporatism already, is what do you think we should prepare for in the future? Because I also think that the conservative movement is also really good at being retroactive instead of proactive. Thanks,
I like the framing of your question, and I agree with you. So things we have to anticipate. Conservatives, we got to start owning our own stuff. Our own servers, our own tech companies, our own banking institutions. We got to own our own stuff. And I hate to make it overly political, but there's a real threat of trying to use corporate power against political opponents. That's number one. Number two, I think, and there's a couple long-term goals and objectives I have for the conservative movement. I think we have to double the homeschooling population in the next 5 years in our country. And we need to make it easier to homeschool. And then finally, I think that we need to encourage young people to get married earlier and celebrate that. And that's a really big problem. And so, and then I have some other ones, which is we should reduce college enrollment and all that. But that's a different, we need more plumbers, electricians, and welders, and police officers, and veterans, and entrepreneurs. We need more people that work with their hands. So I like the framing. I also think we have to anticipate that one of the biggest fights, and we need to be on the right side of this, is artificial intelligence, and that we should be unafraid to say that we should use the power of government to manage artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, it's very scary where it's happening on this. I think this is a bipartisan issue, but if we don't, we're going to be working for these machines very soon. They should always be serving us. And that's something that's happening quick, and we have a little bit of a window here while this technology is still getting worked out before it hits the mass market. But I want to thank you again for your service, and that's a very smart question, so thank you.
Hey, Charlie. So my dad couldn't make it tonight. He's actually working, but before I started, I wanted to let you know that he's a huge fan. You actually sent him an autographed book once.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
What's his name?
LG Hamilton.
Hi, LG. You're filming me there, and you're filming me there, so.
So I'm a high school student here in Edmond, and I wanted to ask your advice, any advice that you would give to a high school student that's about to graduate like me. I've been accepted to multiple universities, but I'm not really sure what my path is in life yet. What advice would you give?
It's a great question. You got to ask yourself, first question, which is so important. Why do you want to go to college? It's a really important question, not where. Now, if you have a good answer to that question, then the next one can be where, and I'll tell you how to answer that question. But I'll make the argument that not every person needs to go to four-year college. That if you're not ready to borrow the money, to get right into it, it's okay to take a gap year. I took a gap year, and it's been 9.5 years of a gap year, and it's worked very nice. I want to be very clear. My criticism of college is not a criticism of learning. My other charge for you tonight is to learn something new every single day. Read the great books. Take the Hillsdale online courses. Listen to Victor Davis Hanson. Pursue truth everywhere, guys. It's going to make you a better activist. It's going to make you a happier and wiser person. It will clarify what's happening in the news. It'll make you less anxious. The more you learn, the better off you'll be. So I want to say, even if, and what's so amazing in the digital age, there's not a lot of positives out of these computers that we walk around with. But one of the positives, guys, is you know what people would have given 250 years ago to have all that access to information in a moment's notice? Use it for good, not just endless TikTok videos of whatever that is, right? And so I'll say this as well, when there's other people that are probably wrestling with this question as well, which if you take a gap year, which I'm a big fan of, it's just kind of a time to take a breath, go find what you think you want to be, and go find someone who's good at that thing and find out if that's really what you want to be. What I find is that the first go at it is usually not exactly what you think it is. Get that out of your system. You might want to be an auto mechanic, and you might be like, this is the worst thing ever. Good. Get it out of your system. And maybe you're going to end up being a professor, because God knows we need more of those that actually love our country. And so the point is that if there's a time to explore, it's when you have no liabilities. The time to explore is when you have no kids, you're not married, and you have no debt. So if there's something you want to get into, that's the time to do it when you're 18 or 19. But I also want to say this, which for the high schoolers out there, don't immediately roll into college if you feel you're just getting pressure from your friends, your teachers, your guidance counselors, and yes, your parents. So I'm going to have a little message to parents watching online and here. I'm going to say this lovingly. If you're not prepared to turn to your neighbors when you see them at the supermarket and say, my son or daughter, little Johnny, is not enrolled in college, and I'm okay with that, then it's more about your ego than your kid's education. You should, and that's a very serious thing we have to talk about at times. And so, and I will say this, that many parents want what's best for their children. And they've been told that college is absolutely the best decision. But 41% of people that go to college don't graduate. 41%. National graduation rate is 59%. I know it's better here in Oklahoma, but that's the national graduation rate. How many of you know someone who dropped out of college? The entire hands go up in the room. And you know those people have a little less confidence, right? A little more uncertainty. They're kind of a little bruised, takes them a little while to get along. They never should have went in the first place. You know why? Because suburban parents don't want their kids to become plumbers. Because we've been taught that plumbers and electricians are the dumb people. You know it's true. You know it's true that the archetype you have of a plumber is someone who comes in who's a little smelly, doesn't really have his act together, works with his hands. You want your kid to go be a philosopher, right? To go study South African migratory bird studies or whatever. There's some good things to study in college. There are. Science, technology, engineering, math, and it's what you do with it. Do it manageably. But the point is that the pressure sometimes comes from this idea of my kid will not work construction. Let me tell you what, we have a deficit in the muscular class in our country right now. We have a shortage of electricians, HVAC, plumbers, computer engineers, people that can code. Got far too many philosopher kings that are serving iced macchiato lattes at local Starbucks telling you that we just need one more $1 trillion stimulus bill and then the revolution will come to our country. There's nothing wrong with blue-collar work. I don't care about where you went to school. I don't care about your piece of paper you have. What matters is your character, which comes from the Greek word tattoo, imprint. It's who you are. You can't change it. I care about your wisdom. Wisdom is the knowledge of things that never change. Things that are eternal. There's practical knowledge and eternal knowledge. Practical knowledge, fine. You go to Harvard, you got a lot of practical knowledge. You have zero wisdom. Why? No God, no wisdom. There's no God at Harvard, there's no wisdom. Plumbers have more wisdom than the philosophers at Harvard, let me tell you that much. So pursue something immediately that you want to explore more than anything else. It might be the right thing, the wrong thing. For me, I got lucky. Ended up being the thing I love, the Turning Point USA. We have this amazing national movement that's bigger than anything I could have dreamed of. I got lucky, and I guess this is an expression that would work well, Governor. I hit oil, is that what you say around here? We struck it. And I know that's not going to be the case for everybody. But I want to say this, your work ethic, your character, your motivation, your drive is what's the most important thing. And the final thing I'll say is this, is care about your development as a human being. Care about whether you're making ethical choices, whether you are acting responsibly, whether that you are becoming the true reflection of the person you want to be eventually. And if you're not, ask yourself the question, why? I wish college did that. College, unfortunately, now is more about convincing you that there's no beauty and no truth in the world, but let's get you very mad about destroying the world around you. So I hope that was a little bit of advice for you to consider, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you. I like your shirt.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, we're going to hold on to the mic because you might run away, but yeah.
Hey, Mr. Kirk, so my name is Will Goodwin. I am a vice president at one of your chapters up in
Awesome.
Tulsa.
Thank you.
And my question is, so this is great, right? I mean, we love this, right? Don't we? Yeah. Everybody love this? So you're guiding young minds to the truth and the good and, you know, kind of how we should vote, I guess, in that way. But if the Democrats are stealing our votes, then what do we do?
Amen. I agree. So let me walk through election integrity. First of all, thank you for your leadership in Turning Point USA. So anyone listen to our podcast? Anyone? Oh, awesome. It's my best friends. I think those of you that do, you know that we spend a lot of time on election integrity, more than most, and we paid a price for it because you're not supposed to talk about that sort of stuff. Let me first say that. This election was the most interfered with election in American history. Let me talk about what we know, then what is probably happened, and then what we need to find out. Is that okay? 3 different categories. Here's what we know. $400 million came in from the tech giants into an organization called the Center for Technology and Civic Life that changed the way we did elections in our country forever. And they subsidized mail-in voting. We know this. They didn't just subsidize mail-in voting. They put a whole machine together, a whole process that streamlined it. It's called the Center for Technology Civic Life. This is unprecedented. $400 million overnight from the wealthiest people on the planet saying that we want everyone to vote by mail. We know, this is in the no category, Jimmy Carter told us this, every study has told us this, that mail-in voting is the most susceptible to potential fraud, especially if you do not have an infrastructure in place to be able to facilitate it. Example number 1, Georgia. 2016, Georgia had 248,000 more or less mail-in votes. In 2020, they had over 1.2 million. They weren't prepared for it. Huge increase. Here's what we also know, that there were agreements done in private, and Governor Kemp did this with Secretary of State Raffensperger, where they relaxed the signature verification standards in Georgia. So you have more mail-in votes, more relaxed signature verification standards, things change altogether. Let me tell us what we know. The social media companies directly intervened on behalf of Joe Biden. Remember the Tony Bobulinski, Hunter Biden story? Under normal circumstances, that's an October surprise bigger than anything we've ever seen before in American politics. And yet that was buried. New York Post was not even allowed to tweet about it. Social media companies deactivated people's accounts. Facebook kicked people off altogether. And all the trending topics, the fact checkers, the conversation was put in a box and it said you are not allowed to get outside the guidelines of criticizing the person running for office. Why did they do that? Well, because in 2016, one of the main reasons why Donald Trump won was because the tech companies did allow dialogue, speech, and for things to be spread, and they said we're never going to allow that to happen again. Let me tell you about the things that probably happened. When you have this many votes, when you have this volume happening, and all of a sudden you have these vote dumps in the middle of the night, and you're kicking out poll watchers, you basically invite every single form of potential shenanigans, interference imaginable. We got to figure out more about this. And this probably happened, and we're still working this through the courts. Now, let me get to the final thing, okay, which is the thing that we don't have enough to build out, which is really, really important to get to this, which is if we do not have a serious conversation, and Joseph Stalin said this very famously, you could vote one way to count the votes actually matter, of how the votes are tabulated in our country, then people are going to lose faith in the entire system altogether. Now, there's a hand recount happening in Arizona right now. 2.1 million votes are being hand recounted. That's a good thing, and we should support that. Because here's why. The more transparency, the better. If there's nothing there, show us. Stop hiding it. Be in the front of this conversation. Instead, it seems that they're running from it, they're dancing around it, and they don't want to have an honest and true conversation around it. But I want to just say one thing. We're going to fix this. We're going to make sure of it. Keep the pressure on. Keep the pressure on some of these other states to fix elections. The way you guys do elections in this state, very good. I want to commend your legislators for taking this seriously, because I'm telling you right now, you go to these other states, it is a complete circus and a mess. And another governor that I want to give a shout out to, Governor Ron DeSantis, who's doing a pretty amazing job. And who had all of his election results in by 9:30 Eastern with zero allegations of massive fraud. So those are the three different categories. But let me tell you this, we can't give up on it. I'm glad you asked about it. I didn't mean to there's only so much time I have to cover certain topics. But I also want to say this, do not become a cynic. People say, I'm never going to vote again. Stop it. You know how lucky it is you're even allowed to show up to somewhere, even if they shred your ballot? And by the way, this whole thing, I'm never going to vote again. It's not like it's a huge waste, like you have something better to do. Like, yeah, I have 10 minutes out of my schedule, I'm going to stick it to the man. No, like that's hard. You're going to wait in Starbucks line for 25 minutes. I'm not going to go vote because I'm such a, look how important I am. Cut it out. Get involved then. Become an election judge. Get involved with your state legislators. If those of you in other states that might not be here that drove, be optimistic. Be solution-oriented, guys. That's who we are. Don't be I get these emails, and God bless them. I know they're coming from a good place, but it drives me a little bit mad because they're like, I'm never voting again. Nothing ever matters. That's what they want you to say. They want you to give up. They want you to have zero faith. Instead, let's say, okay, there's things on the margins. Let's try to fix it. Let's go about it factually. Let's go about it assertively. And that's the way we should go about it. Do not become a cynic, everybody, and ask questions. And I'm telling you right now, I think there's going to be some very big revelations about some of these things in the next couple weeks and months. Thank you for your question. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I drove 3 hours to see you.
Texas?
Wichita, Kansas.
Oh, awesome. Thank you for being here.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so one of my questions is, I live in a actually pretty liberal part of my town, and most of the people are Hispanic and they are black as well. And they use racial victimization for the reasons they can't succeed in life. Me and my dad aren't obviously like that. So my question is, what can I do to debunk that? And also, what advice do you have for me as a Hispanic conservative?
So first of all, thank you for being here. 3.5 hours, that's 7 hours round trip. So thank you for being here. It's hard to be a conservative in America, but it's especially hard to be a conservative if you're Hispanic or black. And I want to say that it's going to be tough. You're going to be called a race traitor. You're going to be called all these sorts of things, right? But you're on the right side of this. Let me tell you why. Do you consider yourself more of a Republican than a Democrat, I would imagine? Oh. Okay, good.
Look, I'm wearing this.
I know. You'd be amazed. Sometimes I get all sorts of answers. Trump had a very diverse coalition ideologically, and let me just tell you that much. The Republican Party's on the right side of this, and we always have been. The Republican Party was formed as an anti-slavery party in Ripon, Wisconsin. Abolition of slavery. The Republican Party, which our first president is Abraham Lincoln, who famously said, if slavery is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. The Republican Party was on the right side of women's suffrage, was on the right side of putting blacks in Congress the first time ever. The Republican Party has always been about the empowerment of the individual regardless of your skin color. Always. The Democrat Party, regardless of what your professors and the pundits will tell you, have always been on the side of suppressing human potential and freedom, and I'll prove it to you. They went from the plantation to intimidation to entitlement. So it used to be that Democrats, they've always cared about skin color. That's the one through line, right? They've always cared more about skin color than about character. And that's a good question to ask, right? Say, why does skin color matter so much? Why is it that, why don't we care about people's character? And they might say, well, because of systemic levels of oppression. Have they said that to you, something like that?
Yes, sir.
Then you should ask a couple questions. If there are systemic levels of oppression, why is it that the richest immigrant group in America for a couple years were Nigerian Americans into America? If we're so systemically racist, how is it that Nigerian Americans were able to succeed so much in our country? Why is it that Asian Americans are actually richer on average than white Americans? Why is it that 3 million black people have immigrated legally into this country, 2 million from Africa, 1 million from the Caribbean since 1970? You know we're the only multiracial country on the planet that's really able to keep its act together? There's a reason for that. It's because Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream that we are all taught as an ideal is now being crushed, is actually a very moral objective, which is I care about your character, I care about who you want to be, who you are, and what you do. And so I would reject the over-racialization that anyone tries to engage in that. And the other thing is this. is say, and I would push back against this, is that the left, they actually, if you read really intimately, they engage in what Clarence Thomas would famously say as the bigotry of low expectations. Great example of this is voter ID. So I support voter ID laws. Voter ID is a very simple, obvious thing. But they say that's so racist because black people can't get ID. That's what they say. I say, no, you're racist for believing black people can't get ID. I actually think that every human being is perfectly capable of getting an identification. And by the way, as a side note, how do they think that people are going to prove their ancestry when it comes to reparations? Like you can get your paperwork together to prove yourself 8 generations as a ancestor of slave, but you can't get a voter ID to go vote? Anyway, that's a side note. It's off topic. Everything you stand for as a conservative, though, I want to empower you, is about lifting up the individual. Everything, not the group. You believe that we want school choice because we want to improve people's well-being. We want freedom of speech because we want the best ideas to win. We are through and through about the elevation of the individual. And so I want to encourage you on that. And I also want to say, don't give up, because you're going to be called all these nasty names and all of this. But we're so happy you're in the conservative movement, and God bless you for coming tonight. So thank you. Hi.
Hi. I'm a Christian, Jesus-loving, homeschooling mom. Just graduated my first. Thank you. But I am also an entrepreneur, and I sell on Amazon. I am a part of hundreds of homeschool moms, Christians, pastors, missionaries, and we all are entrepreneurs on Amazon. And it has opened so many doors for me and my family. So the question for you, a lot of people don't understand this, and I didn't know this either, but Amazon is we're actually just renting warehouse space from them. So I can't even ship my product from my UPS, the local post office store, for the same price that they ship it, mail it, all of it for me. So my question is, I do not like, of course, what's going on with Amazon and Bezos, that 30% of the sellers on Amazon are people like me. So what do we do? I get questions a lot, and I don't ever know how to respond because I know it's been a really good thing.
Yes. So, look, I bash Amazon for a reason. Of course, there's been positives. I mean, you're a testament to that. But I think the negatives are getting way out of control. We need a conservative alternative for you is what we need.
Yes.
And we need it very soon so that, because here's what I'm telling, here's the threat. You say you love Jesus and love America. They could take you off Amazon at any moment.
Oh, I know that. But I sell made in American product, and I think there's a demand for that on Amazon.
Huge.
But I know it's a threat because what we've noticed is that the Christian products available on Amazon are small, so we try to hit that market. Whether or not the market's just not there as in the same way it used to be, but they could take us off. We
and so there needs to be a competitor, but what they've done is they've made it where that is the best business decision for you based on their size. So you almost have to conform, in some ways, maybe not yet, to the woke industrial complex by being on it eventually. And so that's one of my arguments for breaking up Amazon, which is eventually their ideology might very well impact your ability to sell or move your goods. And so, look, there's positives and negatives to all things. Amazon has obviously been a positive for a lot of different things. But the negative is that you're able to go online, for sure. The 40% of small businesses that have disappeared in this country, large in part because of the corporatization of our country of Amazon, haven't. And so the success stories need to be maybe replatformed on a different place. But I'm also of the belief that Amazon is a very, you know why they're able to do the shipping the way? So Amazon's not, they don't have like flying drones yet. Well, they sort of do. But like the point is that they're not totally that way. You know, they're actually not a shipping company. They're a server company. $16 billion of their revenue every single year come from servers, like Twitter and Netflix use their servers, and they have a huge profit on that side, and they need a loss on the other side to be able to basically put up against their gains. So they're able to put packages for less, which is the equivalent of dumping products.
Right, but that's what's good for me as an entrepreneur, and that's why it's hard, because I don't have to have the storefront. I mean, I can still make a living.
The point is that they're going to get you addicted to that, and they will raise the prices eventually. That's the fear, right? And this is the dumping model that the Chinese have done for us forever, right? They'll bring in all this cheap steel or cheap solar panels, and eventually, oh, this is wonderful, then they'll turn on a 25% increase, right? And then they'll say, you have to conform to our LGBTQ standards. It'll happen like that. So I hear you totally, and I admit it because they're able to subsidize it. I think we need an alternative, so you're not going to be put in that box.
So what do we do? I mean, I'm
Hopefully an
asking
alternative.
for me and all of the moms that work with me.
I
What do
don't know
we
the
do?
specifics of your business model. I would start looking for other options soon. Hopefully they'll be able to do it. But also, my other piece of advice is find other people in your position and build a coalition. Your power is in your strength and unity of maybe 600 other people that are doing the same thing as you. Then you have staying power with Amazon. They're like, hey, if you do this, then you're going to lose all of us, if that makes sense. Yeah. So then you're no longer alone, but you kind of have a coalition together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll do a couple more, then we're going to hear from the great governor.
So this is not a specifically political question, but one thing in the last couple of years that has even got me interested in politics is the many different books I've read that have kind of showed me the importance of politics as an expression of a nation's values and principles. So I wanted to ask you, what has been the most impactful book that you've read in your life?
Boy, the Bible would be number one, obviously, and I encourage everyone to read it. So there's a book recently that's been phenomenal. It's by Vishal Mangalwalde. It's called The Book That Built Your World. I highly encourage, we were just talking about it before, it's absolutely terrific. Federalist Papers are phenomenal. I highly encourage everyone to read and reread those. It's kind of it's the anonymous explanation of the greatest political document ever written, which is the United States Constitution. There's so many. I mean, anything by Edmund Burke is terrific. His commentaries on the French Revolution are phenomenal. But I would encourage this, that it's less of a singular book and it's more on the canon of a book, of books. It's more on kind of a series. And so what do I mean by that? Be very familiar with the thoughts and the ideas that impacted our entire system of government. Here's an example. Thomas Jefferson said in the Declaration of Independence, the laws of nature and nature's God, and also life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Did he come up with that? No. He's basically a plagiarist. Took it from John Locke. Where did John Locke learn from? So you dive deeper and deeper. The point is that the understanding of where these ideas came from are super important. And a book that I've reread that I really encourage everyone is Aristotle's book on politics and Aristotle's book on ethics. It's 2,400 years old, but guess what? It's just as applicable today. Why? Because human beings don't change. Human nature is constant. No matter how much technology we get and all this stuff, we are just as broken, greedy, self-interested, and awful as we were 2,400 years ago. You read Aristotle's Politics, you think you're reading the Wall Street Journal that's happening today. I kid you not. In the first chapter of Aristotle's Politics, I did a whole podcast on this. You guys might have heard this. He talks about closing schools and that despots and tyrants want people to not be able to recognize each other as a way to try to dehumanize them. 2,400 years ago. Now, why do I love that? It's because all of a sudden you realize that there are some things that never change. And that's the other piece of advice is go find wise and beautiful things that were written before you and know them very well. You'll be a happier person because of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing,
Howdy.
Charlie? How you doing, man? So here in Oklahoma, in a lot of conservative circles, I know my circles, my family and friends, a lot of people talk about the secession of Texas as like a last-ditch backdoor plan B. It doesn't seem very feasible to me, but I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's not feasible. I mean, look, I'm an opponent in the current state for a couple different reasons. The temporary unity we have in this country is so unique. It is. And it's something we shouldn't take for granted. And let me just tell you, we look at history, the balkanization of any territory does not end well. The most famous recent example could be Yugoslavia, where after the death of Tito, of course, the Yugoslavian Balkan Peninsula, that's where we get the term balkanization from, split into 4 different countries. And we all know what happened after that. It was brutal. It was awful. It's not good, because then you get into all sorts of different discussions. What happens to the military? How do you power yourself? What are your trade agreements? So I don't like it. And I understand the thought process. It's not that I don't like it philosophically. It's not that I don't like where people's anxieties come from, if that makes sense. But I'm gonna hold out for this country and this beautiful gift we've been given. There's something very special in our unity, and I also think there's something I haven't touched on at all tonight, which, by the way, every one of our speeches this week will be different. We're going to Missouri tomorrow, then Kentucky, and one of those I'm going to really focus on China, but I'll talk about it right now. The Chinese Communist Party is an existential threat to everything we love, and they would love nothing more than to see America fracture. That would be a gift to them. So for just that reason, start and stop alone, we should be very, very slow to try to self-separate. And that's me speaking in current time as it is, for a lot of different reasons. And I know that there's really good people that are thoughtfully trying to go about it, and they mean well, but also understand this is not, anyone here that dealt with divorce knows that it's not exactly something that's enjoyable. And this would be an exponent of a million, right? And so we have a gift. It's a gift that you're able to drive south and go to Dallas without having to go through a checkpoint, right? Yeah. It's a good thing. Let's try to preserve that.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you, buddy.
You mentioned Boulder and Atlanta earlier, and I was wondering your opinions on how to prevent future shootings on happening.
Yeah. It's a great point. So, I mean, I don't like mass shootings. They are actually statistically comprised and composed of far less of the gun violence deaths in our country than people would believe. So let's take each example. We're still learning about both of them. I mean, the obvious thing in front of us is a mental health issue. We know that. I think that we're medicating our children far too young in our country. I think the pharmaceutical lobby has way too much power over getting our young children to be taking medication they should not be taking, and I think that's part of it. It's number one. Number two, I think that we have to understand that in these instances, we have to have all the facts laid out in front of us before we try to make any sort of public policy decisions. But let me tell you what we shouldn't do, if that's okay, because that's actually equally as important. What we shouldn't do is we shouldn't pass a bunch of gun registry, gun confiscation bills in Congress and vote for them because something really awful, tragic, and unspeakably evil happened. That's the lesson that we had from the last 10 years. I'm glad we did not rush to judgment after the brutal tragedy in Broward, Florida, or in Newtown, Connecticut. So there's 33,000 gun deaths that happen every single year in America. It sounds like a lot, right? Well, 2/3 of those are death by suicide. 2/3. So all of a sudden that I'm only saying this because you're going to hear all these arguments repeatedly, so I'm going to give you a little bit of help here. That 33,000 number is actually not as high as you might think. It's 11,000. About 800 is accidental discharges, people just being fools with their weapons. The vast majority of the remaining can be attributed to be domestic disputes or gang violence using handguns. Handguns are by far the number one weapon, the number one firearm used in death when it comes to in this country. So if it is the public policy position of the Democrat Party to ban handguns, then be clear about it. It's a very unpopular position, and it would do very little to actually reduce crime. Now, they focus on Joe Biden. I don't even think he knows what this means. I don't think he knows anything he's saying. But he comes and he says, I want to ban assault rifles, right? It's a made-up term. It doesn't exist. Anyone that understands weapons and understands firearms says that doesn't mean anything. So they say, well, it's AR. Well, AR stands for Armalite Rifle, not assault rifle. So I'm going to say something that it's hard to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. Liberty's hard. Liberty comes at a price. Sometimes our love of liberty comes up against our love for human beings. And they're not contradictory, by the way. But sometimes say, oh my goodness, these people passed away. Is there something we can do through a public policy position to make this never happen again? And I'm here to tell you, no. And any policy prescription wouldn't get your desired outcome actually done. And the cost would be the sacrificing of all of our liberties together. And this comes to a final point. Why do we have the Second Amendment? Most conservatives are afraid to talk about this. We just dive right into it. It's not for hunting. I love hunting. It's not for self-protection. That's fun too. It's because the Founding Fathers knew that if a citizenry did not have the potential to defend itself against tyranny, this is nothing more than a hostage situation. In Hong Kong, when the Chinese Communist Party was tyrannizing their citizens 18 months ago, they had all the power. If every Hong Kong resident had an AR-15 at home, the Chinese Communist Party would have went to the table, they'd say, what do you want? It actually reduces the threat of future violence, the fact that people are able to own firearms and weapons. Let me say this. If we have this liberty, you have to make good choices with that liberty. But you look at the statistics, you look at how many people own weapons in our country, how many people own firearms. It's amazing how responsible we actually are with these weapons. The vast majority are people that are engaging in violent crime anyway, with gang loyalties, and they're in the pursuit of crime anyway. It is not the target of their bills as per usual. And so, unfortunately, we're going to have to go through another gun debate in our country. So I'm not going to be able to answer the first part of it because I need more information, but I'll tell you what we're not going to do. We are not going to allow our God-given liberties and rights to be infringed upon. We are not going to allow responsible gun owners to be slandered in the media, and we are not going to allow them to take our weapons away. That's what we're not going to have happen. Thank you.
How you doing, Charlie? I have a kind of a coattail question off that. So in light of the recent mass killings that have happened, how do we educate our schools? And nowadays, like, I know back in the day there used to be like gun safety in schools. How do we fight back against the government trying to do these unconstitutional gun grabs? And then how do we get schools to start showing that guns aren't as bad as the media portrays them to be? Because I know many people think that AR-15 is a fully automatic when it's really just a modern day sporting rifle.
And it could be illegally adjusted to be fully automatic, right? And that's against the law. So first of all, you need great governors like you guys have here that will protect your Second Amendment rights.
Thank you, Governor Stitt.
And that's a big deal. It's a big deal to have good leaders. Don't take that lightly. A lot of states don't. And so that's a big deal. You know who the fastest growing population in America that's buying firearms right now? Young women. Violent crime is on the rise. It is. If you care about women's rights, which, by the way, what is a woman? They can't answer that question anymore, right? What is a woman? It's like, oh no, right? You want to see that just like endless. You want to talk about the great equalizer? Firearms, the great equalizer. One of the biggest, and this is not the main reason. I already told you the main reason why with the Second Amendment, but a secondary reason is self-protection. And young women should be given, obviously, the right and the responsibility. I think that's a good way to actually, the reason why these gun grabs have been unsuccessful is because moms and women stand up against it. We kind of know how men are going to vote on this issue generally. It's like an 80-20. But I think we need to lean in on that more. Because you asked the question, how are we going to change public perception? We need to talk about how moms and women's are the fastest growing gun owners in the country for a reason. And that's a really good thing. And so we need to publicize it more. We need to advertise, whatever it is. We need to talk about that more because the perception is that it's all men and it's all just for violence. And that's just not the case at all. It's mothers that love their family and love their children and care about their communities that go and buy those firearms. You want to go see the biggest increase in gun ownership in the last 2 years? It happened right after all those riots in the country. You notice how popular gun ownership was then. So I hope that's somewhat helpful. But the other thing is this, is that we cannot, in these times of tragedy, because it's a tragedy, allow all of our public policy decisions to be steered by emotion. That's a hard thing to do. Founding fathers, remember, they put the Constitution to spread power throughout time and throughout space. Time's important, because then cooler heads hopefully prevail. That's why impeachments that happen in 12 hours or less are a really bad idea. Founding fathers knew this. If you're going to do something big, do it slowly and do it correctly. Measure twice, cut once. Especially when you're talking about taking away people's firearms. So that's the biggest thing I tell everyone. I wish I could just say, let's have this conversation in 1 week when we have all the facts and we're not completely emotionally driven. But unfortunately, the media has a narrative. We know that. They have an agenda. And that's where you guys come in. It should be a no-compromise position. But do it factually, do it compassionately, but do it directly and have no compromise on this issue. Thank you. I appreciate it. The last question, and then we'll invite your great governor up. Yes.
Hi, Charlie. I'm Pam Pollard. I'm a former state Republican Party chair and now National Committee woman, and I do have my secret weapon here in my purse, so I'll hold on to it. One of those gun-toting mamas. But I just wanted to say thank you for what you do for the young people. To the young people in the audience, the Republican Party invites you to come in. But we can't get you to come, but Charlie can.
Okay.
So thank you, Charlie, for that. We have a young lady in the back who was the chairman of the Democrat Party in her county and of her college. She told me that you and what you had to say, the intelligent conversation that you bring to the young people is what changed her. So I just wanted to say thank you, Charlie, for what you do of reaching out to young people.
Thank you for saying that. And so it's awesome. And
Hi, Charlie.
Yeah.
I just have a question about the H.R. 1 being passed.
Okay, yeah, I'll do super quick. H.R. 1, I just want to reinforce that previous point. I'm sorry. Great, everyone get involved on the local level, and you guys got great leaders here, and we're about to hear from one. H.R. 1, nationwide mail-in voting. Basically, it would destroy fair and free elections as we know it. Instead of trying to fix our elections, they're trying to permanently fix our elections through H.R. 1, and it's very dangerous, very destructive. Your two great senators here have already come out against it, and they deserve to be commended for that, and they're doing the right thing, and we're seeing this happen very quickly. It comes down to two people, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. And I believe prayer is something that is real. It's not just a meditative thing. Pray for the two Democrats in West Virginia and Arizona that they will hold the line on the filibuster to not break the filibuster to pass H.R. 1. It's basically all in their hands. And that's for a lot of different reasons. Losing Georgia, for those of us that care about, Republicans getting elected, Turning Point being a nonprofit, we have to be careful the way we word that. We're very disappointed by that. It comes down to Sinema and Manchin. That's it. And so if they decide, they say we need the 60-vote threshold, it's not going to happen. And so your senators do a wonderful job for you guys here, so I'd encourage them to keep on doing that. It's going to come down to some other states, like West Virginia and Arizona. Thank you for your intelligent question. So I want to now say, we are honored here to have a wonderful governor. I could tell you from other states that locked down far too long and infringed on liberties, you got a governor that has courage, and he has guts, and you guys should be very thankful for that. So please welcome the great governor of Oklahoma up on the stage. Sorry to keep you waiting, man.
Wow, thank you so much. Hey, thank you. I understand, Charlie, that this is your first event back in over a year.
That's right.
And you chose Oklahoma.
Well, and we chose it because it's open, and you've been doing a wonderful job. You really have been.
Absolutely. Well, we are about freedom in the state of Oklahoma. One of only 9 governors that did not shut down, that did not do mask mandates. Took a few bullets back in March, April, and May, and June, but people are starting to wake up and starting to take Oklahoma's lead. And our numbers are not dissimilar to any other state that took much more draconian methods. California, for example, still shutting down businesses. A lot of their schools are still shut down. I have been hammering, Charlie, our schools to be open, and now we have every school in the state of Oklahoma is open. And Charlie, you're going to love this. I'm giving an award, an economic development award, to Gavin Newsom, okay? He has done more for economic development in the state of Oklahoma by what he's doing with his policies in California. So commerce has never been bigger. People are just sick of it. So I'm so happy that you're here. And I really want to thank the young people in this room for being engaged. Man, when I walked in here and I saw this room filled to come hear you speak, I mean, it warms my heart. I'm telling you, an informed citizenry is so important. Once you know the issues, like you said, we are on the right side of this. And so just do not be afraid. The Bible teaches us 365 times, I think God tells us, do not be afraid, be bold. And I'm just so sick of people telling us how we should live, and we believe in personal responsibilities in Oklahoma. So as long as I'm your governor, I'm going to make sure that we stand for those God-given rights, we stand on this for the Second Amendment, and we'll protect our liberties here in the state of Oklahoma. So, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
And thank you, Governor. Give it up, guys. Great governor of Oklahoma, doing amazing. And so, thank you so much. So I just want to thank all you guys coming tonight. Stay engaged, stay involved. You have a wonderful leader here. I want all of you guys to run for office and do all sorts of different things. And thank you for coming tonight. And make this the starting point for your involvement. If you're not involved with Turning Point USA, please do that and start a high school group, start a college group. And if we have just piqued your curiosity, your action will determine the future of the country. If you believe that, the country will be saved. We've been given this gift. Stay involved. Do not be intimidated. I want to thank our amazing purple shirt warriors, is what I'm going to call them. They do a great job. And also, just a quick thing of total self-promotion. If you are not yet subscribed to the Charlie Kirk Show, I know you laugh, but how great would it be to beat the New York Times on the podcast charts by tomorrow? That would be great. And so if you take out your phone and just type in Charlie Kirk Show to the podcast app, it really helps us and makes us less likely to be canceled. So you guys own the future of the country. Act it, believe it, and our best days are ahead. God bless you guys. Thank you so much. Is he back here?